Hi, welcome back to our class. And this is week 13, and I know that this is the week for Thanksgiving, and probably everyone will start to have the holiday since this Wednesday, probably this Wednesday or Thursday. However, we still have the lecture for this week, and yeah, for this week we are going to talk about stress and happiness. So there are two topics in this week: stress and happiness. So let's start the lecture for this week. So first we can talk about the stress. What is stress is? We can define what stress is, and we can find the causes of stress, and also we can discuss about the consequences of stress. And also finally, the most importantly, we can talk about how to manage stress, how to reduce stress. And let's start. So before talking about the stress, let's recap about emotions, because in week 10, we talk about emotions and motivation. We talk about the cause of emotion, of every emotion. So Lazarus, Professor Lazarus developed a theory called the cognitive mediation theory. So in his theory, it tells us that how emotions are created. So for example, in this slide, if somebody sees a lion, so the object is a lion, there is an external life event that is happening in that moment. So a lion shows up. And the next step is the thinking process. What is the thinking process? So the person will get information from the memory that lions kill people. That is the common sense. That is knowledge that is stored in that person. And after that cognition, after that thinking process, there is the appraisal, the process of appraisal. So for example, the person will think that lions are a threat. So lions kill people, right? So lions are threats to everybody. And after the appraisal, there is the emotion. So the emotion that is created in that moment is fear, right? So lions shows up, lions kill people, and the lions are the threat. So the corresponding emotion is fear. The person is afraid of that lion. And the following thing to happen is the following action of that person. The person runs away or does something to deal with that fear, right? So you can see clearly the process of how emotion is created. So the life event happens first, and there is the cognition, the perceptions of that event. And after perceptions, there's another cognitive process, a thinking process, that is appraisal. Appraisal is a evaluation of a life event to one's well-being. So the person may interpret this event as threatening to his or her well-being or not. So that is what is happening in appraisal. So that is Lazarus' cognitive mediation theory that tells us how emotion is created. So why do I talk about this here? Because stress is also happening in a similar way. It's exactly the same process. Basically, is exactly the same process. So let's see how stress happens. So a stress is a process that an individual, a person perceives and responds to events in a way that that person interprets that event as threatening or overwhelming to one's well-being. So there is an event, and that person has the interpretation of that event. The interpretation is either overwhelming or threatening to that person's well-being. So this is stress. A stress is a process of interpretation that is a response to a life event. So we can see in this process that there are two causes of stress. One cause is the life event that is very stressful. So some kind of life events happening in one's life that makes somebody stressful is called the stressors. So those life events are really stressful, and those life events are stressors. So stressors are life events that make people stressful. And another part of stress is the subjective interpretation or explanation of those stressors, of those life events. So one might, that individual might interpret the event as threatening to their own well-being or not. So if they interpret the event as threatening to their own life, to their own well-being, stress happens. Stress is created after the process of evaluating that event as threatening to one's well-being. So you can see the process here. So there is a life event, and the person has a response to that life event. That person has a interpretation of that life event. That person will evaluate to what degree that event will threaten to his or her own well-being. And if the person interprets that life event as threatening, that person has stress. So not only life events cause stress, but also the interpretation of that events cause stress. So the two factors, they jointly influence people to have stress or not. First, the life event, and secondly, the interpretation of events. So appraisal, that is something that we have learned in the chapter about emotion. So it's a thinking process. It's a cognitive process that evaluates the significance of events in terms of one's well-being. So in appraisal, the person will evaluate to what degree or whether that event threatens somebody's well-being or not. And last time we didn't talk about there are two types of appraisal. So we only talk about what appraisal is, and the appraisal process creates every emotion. And we didn't mention that there are two kinds of appraisal. There are two steps in the appraisal process. There are two types. The first type, or the first step, is the primary appraisal. So the primary appraisal happens first. It is an evaluation or judgment about the degree of a potential harm or threat to one's well-being that a stressor may entail. So in the first step, that person will think about, to what degree this life event is threatening or harmful. So the person might interpret the event as threatening, something that might damage somebody's well-being. But another possibility is that the person might interpret the event as challenging. So what is something that is challenging? Challenging thing is something that might help growth. So if you think, this is challenging, it means that I may overcome this challenge. I may have growth. I may develop more skills after overcoming this challenge. So the person might interpret the event as threatening and will evaluate how threatening that life event is. But the person might interpret the event as challenging. That is something that is helpful, help the person to grow. So that is what it is happening in primary appraisal. And in the second step, another part of appraisal is called secondary appraisal. It is a judgment or the evaluation of the options available to cope with a stressor. So there is a stress and the person wants to deal with the stress, but how to deal with that, how to cope with the stressor. There are some options. There might be some options. If the options are effective and available, the threats are actually low because there is a stressor, that a stressor is threatening to somebody's well-being, but that person has a lot of options and those options are very effective to manage, to reduce that stressor. The threats to one's well-being are actually very low because that person has the strategy to deal with that, to cope with that. And if the options to cope with the stressor are not very effective, or there are not a lot of options there to cope with that stressor, the threats are actually really high. So all this process that I talk about is a thinking process in somebody's mind, is the content in the secondary appraisal. So firstly, the person will evaluate or judge whether this life event is threatening and to what degree this life event is threatening. And in the second step, the person will think if there are options to cope with that life event. If the options are very effective, useful, and a lot, the threats are, the degree to threaten the well-being is not that high. It's very low. If there are not effective options, the stress from that life event is actually very high. So here is a graph that shows the two steps of appraisal. So firstly, we can see that there is a stressor that is happening. That is a life event. Here's a stressor, and then there's perception, and that thing is what, and there is appraisal process in the mind. It is a thinking process, and firstly there is a primary appraisal. The person will judge if this stressor is challenging or threatening, and to what degree it is threatening. If it is a challenge, so there is a potential for gain or growth. So if that is challenging, it's okay. It's not a stress. I don't have to deal with it. I don't have to cope with it. It is challenge. I just do what I want to do. If it is a threat, if I think that is a threat, it means that stressor might lead to harm, loss, or negative consequences. I might suffer suffer from some kind of negative consequences or harm or other bad things. So if the person thinks that this life event is threatening, it will go to the second step, that is the secondary appraisal. So if that event is very stressful, and that person needs to think of strategies to cope with that event, right? So we'll think about different kind of options to cope with that stressor. and we'll think about how effective those options are. If those options are very effective, very useful, the stress are very low. If those options are not very useful or effective, the threats are really high. So you can see from this chart that when the stressor happens, in the primary appraisal, if the person thinks that is challenge, there's no stress. If the person thinks that is a threat to his or her own well-being, he or she will go to the secondary appraisal. We'll think about the options to cope with that threat. If the options are considered as effective, there's low stress. So the stress is kind of a very low or no stress. But if the person thinks that the options are not effective or there are no options to cope with that stressor, the stress is really high. So you can see that stress happens not only there is a stressor and that is there is stress, but sometimes the stressor happens, people still don't have stress because they have different kinds of appraisal process. In the process of appraising, people may perceive that event as stressful or not. If that person thinks that the event is very stressful, that person is very stressful. So finally, the existence of stress depends on how people appraise, how people think about it. It is determined by the person, the thinking process, not by the stressor. Of course, there are a lot of stressors in life, and every person meets a lot of stressors in their life. However, not everybody will have stress in responding to those life stressors. Some people may have stress after responding to those stressors, but some people may not have stress because they may perceive that stressor as challenge, or they think that there are a lot of useful strategies to deal with that stress. They don't have to be stressful. So you can see going through the primary and secondary appraisal, the stress will happen. This is how stress happens to our mind. So we talk about appraisal, and that is one part of why stress happens. Another part of why stress happens is the stressors. There are a lot of stressful events that make people stressful. So any events that are really frustrating or unhealthy might make people stressful. So in nature, some life events will not make people stressful. But some events in nature are very frustrating. The nature of these events make people very frustrating. And the nature of these events are not really healthy to people. So this kind of events, to a larger degree, will make people very stressful. So what kind of stress, what kind of events are there? There are a lot of examples on this slide. You can see that. The stressful events, the stressors may come from the physical environment, such as a noise. So there's a lot of noise on the street and people may get stressed because of the noise. Or the pollution, air pollution, water pollution. That is unhealthy stuff from the environment that make people very stressful. And also some kind of unhealthy lifestyles. So the lifestyles are personal choice, right? So that's not you cannot blame the physical environment, but you can only blame that person. That person has unhealthy lifestyles, such as the poor sleeping habits. If that person stay up really late in the night, that person may be very stressful because of that. And also people might meet a lot of undesired events. A lot of things happens, you know. There are some events that are not desired by people. For example, traffic jams. So especially in the greater Los Angeles area, there are a lot of traffic jams on the highway and on the local streets. And you know, and that is very stressful, and people cannot avoid that sometimes. And sorry about the interruption. There is a message just now, and yeah. So sometimes the traffic jams are undesired events that are very stressful. And I think of another example of undesired events. Just now, there are a few messages coming to my cell phone, and yeah, and there's ringing of the cell phone, and that is undesired event for me, and that is stressful. Yeah, that is stressful because I'm recording the lecture, and there's noise in the environment suddenly, so that is stressful, undesired events. And there is some factors from the society, not from the events, not from the personal choice, not from the physical environment, but from the entire society, such as discrimination. So we have talked about discrimination in the chapter about social psychology. And that is very, very, very stressful because that is the biased notions from people, and a lot of people have that kind of bias, and people who are discriminated against might meet a lot of stressful events because of those discrimination. And also sometimes the society will go through the economic crisis, and nobody can stop that. Nobody can, you know, stop that thing. And there is just a economic crisis, and people must suffer from it. So those societal factors are very stressful sometimes. And sometimes there are things in the interpersonal relationships, such as some undesired interpersonal events, such as rape and sexual harassment. So those events are from other people. And those events are also very, very stressful. And because of rape and sexual harassment, people may suffer from the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder. So that is a disorder that is characterized by this really severe stress because of the traumatic events. And they're not just stressful, they're not just stressed. People are not just stressed, but they are severely stressed. They get a disorder. It's not a normal stress. There's too much stress because of that. And sometimes there are some kind of traumatic events. People suffer from the natural disasters or military combat. A lot of the veterans suffer from a PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because of the combat, the military combat. They experience a lot of the very bloody fights, and they kill people. Their peers are killed by the enemies and so forth. It is very cruel. That is very brutal for everybody to go through. So because of the military combat, people might be very, very, very stressful. And also same way as the natural disaster, the people cannot stop it. such as the rainstorm, the snowstorm, the earthquakes, the hurricanes, and people cannot stop it, and then people must suffer from that. Very stressful. And also some other traumatic events, such as car accidents, some other kind of accidents. And another kind of stressors are life changes. So one example is the death of family members, or the death of a pet, or loss of a pet, or loss of something that is very important. So those events are just really fundamental changes in life, and those events are very, very stressful. So you can see that sometimes, even though people may perceive the stressful event as a challenge, not a threat. However, sometimes some events are too frustrating or too unhealthy, and it is less likely that people will perceive those events as challenges instead of threats. You know, such as the natural disasters, such as the death of family members. Nobody can really be so psychologically strong to perceive those life events as challenges. So probably 100% of the people will perceive these events as threats into one's well-being. However, some kind of life events, such as a noise in the environment, such as a pollution, such as the unhealthy lifestyles. So sometimes people can perceive these life events as challenges instead of threats, because they're not really that threatening. Actually, the nature of those events is not that awful. Yeah. And there are more events. You can think about more events. You can pause the video right now and think about, oh, what kind of stress are there? What kind of life events that make you stressful in your life? You can think about it. And next, we can talk about the consequences of the stress. So what does stress do? So what the stress does to us is that at once there is stress, at once our mind will perceive the event as stressful or threatening. There will be a fight or flight response. That is a response, that is a physical response that we cannot stop. We cannot control our body not have that response. We must have that response at once we perceive something as threatening. So because that is a mechanism that for our body to respond to stress in life. When the fight or flight response is happening, the sympathetic nervous system and the endocrine system in somebody's body will be activated. And you know that endocrine system will release some hormones that create stress. And the sympathetic nervous system is activated for responding to some kind of very emergent events. So that is what we learned from the chapter about the biopsychology. So you can review that part. So the sympathetic nervous system will is that part of the nervous system is especially effective to respond to some like threatening life events. So the fight or flight response is happening. So why is it called the fight or flight response? Because at once that response is activated, the person will either choose to cope with that stressor or fight with that stressor, fight with that threat, or choose to run away, to escape from that stressful event. So fight means directly coping, means directly facing that threat. Flight means running away, means escaping. So either directly fight with that threat or run away from that threat. So there are only two options. So that response is very, very quick, is automatic. We cannot control that. And that is the mechanism that our body wants to protect us from the threats. So either with fight with it or run away from it. So that is the response that is very adaptive in responding to physical threats for our ancestors, because our ancestors in the primitive society, they need to face a lot of physical threats, such as very dangerous animal. So here's a cartoon in this slide. You can see that there's a tiger showing up, and people must make a decision as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, to either fight with that tiger or run away from that tiger. So that's why our body has that fight or flight response. Actually, stress, the phenomena of stress, is a mechanism that help us to deal with threats, right? So if there are stress in life, we must have a response to it. So that's why we have stress when we think that thing is very stressful. So in that kind of a society, our ancestors most likely will meet physical threats, so dangerous animals and natural disasters and so forth. And nowadays, in the modern society, there are a lot of things that make us stressful. So we just talked about there are a lot of stressful events, such as the societal factors, such as the noise in the physical environment, such as the interpersonal events. So that we might have a lot of fight or flight response because of those stressful events, not only physical threats. Yeah, but fight or flight response might not be very useful or effective in responding to those some of those events, such as the noise in the physical environment, such as the economic stress, economic crisis, right? So, like, for example, in front of economic crisis, you cannot fight with that crisis. It's not concrete. It's abstract, right? It's a phenomenon in the society. You cannot directly fight with that crisis. You cannot run away from that crisis. It's overwhelming. It's everywhere in the society. So fight or flight response might not be useful nowadays, but it used to be very useful for ancestors. But for us nowadays, we need to have a lot of other strategies to deal with that stress instead of deal with that stressful events instead of just having fight or flight response. But fight or flight response has been a very automatic response in our body that is existing in everybody's physical body. And then there are some following consequences because of the fight or flight response. For example, there are some biochemical changes. It induces a lot of chemical changes in our physical body, such as the release of stress hormones. There are a few types of hormones are making people stressful. So we call them stress hormones. So those hormones are released so that we can feel the stress. Sometimes we can feel all that we are really stressed. How do you know that? Because the stress hormones are released. And also there are some kind of disorders because of the fight or flight response, some psychosomatic disorders, such as hypertension. The physical body is too nervous, is overly nervous, so that is called hypertension. For example, the muscles are really hard, not soft, because of the hypertension. And also asthma. Sometimes people get asthma because of the stress. And also inflammation. Sometimes people get inflammation because of stress. And the immune system is very weak, becomes very weak because of stress. When people are very stressed, the immune system is not working very well. The immune system is very vulnerable. So people get sick very easily when people are stressed. That also explains why people get inflammation because of the vulnerable immune system. And also stress can lead to some like a physical illness, such as cancer, such as headaches, such as the backaches, so the pain in the back, and also the cardiovascular disease because of stress. Because of stress, hormones do a lot of things to our physical body. There are a lot of physical changes in our body, so that it creates asthma, inflammation, and hypertension, and other physical changes. And cardiovascular disease is also a result of those physical changes. And it also might make us have shorter life because of long-term stress. So that there is a scientific evidence for that. There is a video that introduces the consequences of stress. We can watch this video for more understanding.
Stress is a feeling we all experience when we are challenged or overwhelmed, but more than just an emotion. Stress is a hardwired trap. But when
Okay, so let's yeah. So this video is very interesting because it's use anime to concretely shows the negative consequences of stress. So as the video shows, there's a lot of physical changes and make the physical body to have a lot of illness such as cardiovascular disease and heart attack and uh, diabetes and so forth. And yeah, and also make people to have shorter life because of the long-term stress. Because of there are telomeres on the chromosomes, and in the chromosomes there are DNA. So every time the cell divides, and the cell copies itself into a divides into two cells, the cells are copied, and every part of the chromosome is the same, but the telomere on the top of the chromosomes gets shorter every time the cell is divided. So when our physical body gets renewed, actually the cells in the physical body have very shorter life, but the cells are copying themselves all the time. Every day there are a lot of new cells and a lot of old cells die in the physical body. So that's why we can keep alive. But every time the cell divides itself, every body there are new cells. There are shorter telomeres in the DNA, in the chromosomes. And if we oftentimes have stress, the telomeres are damaged. So the telomeres are shorter after a certain amount of division or copying. So that's why stress can make life shorter because of the damaged telomeres. And yeah, so that is the biological consequences or healthy consequences of stress. And also there is psychological consequences, not only physical change, but psychological change. So stress can make us have chronic stress. So chronic means long term. So that is a stress that lasts very long. You know that we know that because of some life events, we have stress. That is because of some life event. If that life event is gone, stress is gone. But chronic stress is different. We don't meet any life events that are stressful, but we still can feel stress. For what? Because of a chronic stress. Too much stressful events can make our physical body not respond to events very well. It's like the muscle. If we train our muscle gets stronger. But if we train our muscle too harsh, too much, our muscles will get damaged. It's the same with stress. If we meet a lot of stressful events, we are stressful. But after that, we'll recover from that stress. The stress will go. But for the long run, if we have too much stress, if we have a stress for too long time, we cannot go back to the normal level. We will have the chronic stress. We will have stress no matter what we meet, no matter what happens in life. We will have chronic stress. That is a possible consequence of too much stress. And also there is anxiety, there is depression. These are these consequences following stress. So people with stress, they are very worried, they are very anxious. They are very anxious about what might happen in the future. And the people with depression, will learn this next week. But depression is the symptoms that the people's energy, subjective energy level is very low. It means that they don't have the energy to do things. They don't have the energy to be happy. They are not happy all the time. They are just very low keyed. Their emotions are very low. No energy to get up even. Sometimes they want to get sleep. They don't want to do anything. That is the symptoms of the depression. And also the consequence of the stress is burnout. It's kind of a chronic stress. It's a emotional or psychological state of physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual exhaustion. So the key characteristic of burnout is that there's a strong feeling of exhaustion in terms of physical energy, in terms of emotion, in terms of cognitive resources. For example, there is a long-term fatigue. So the people with burnout will feel that they are always tired, no matter what, no matter what time is it, no matter how much sleep they get, they always feel tired because of burnout. And they do not have a lot of energy. They are not energetic to do things. And there's a feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. That is intellectual exhaustion. They feel that they cannot help. They cannot do something to change the situation. They're feeling helpless. There is no hope in the future. That's their feeling. That is because of the intellectual exhaustion. So burnout is a consequence of chronic stress. It's a long-term stress. If there's too much stress every day and they always feel stress every day, most likely they will get burnout. They'll get the symptom called burnout. And there is a lot of research about the burnout in the workplace. A lot of the employees get burned out because they get a lot of stress at work. So they get really tired. They don't have the energy to do the work, and they think that they cannot do anything to change the situation. They cannot do anything to gain the achievement. And yeah, it's very pathetic situation. This is the one of the consequences, psychological consequences of stress. And next, we can talk about how to respond to stress. And so far, we have talked about the cause of stress, the consequences of stress. And now we can talk about the individual differences in responding to stress, because every person is unique, every person is different. You know that for the same life event that is stressful, some people may have stress, some people might not. So what is the difference? Why individuals are different? What kind of differences make them have different reactions to the same stressful event? So the first concept that we need to know is called resilience. So it's a feature of individuals. So what feature is that? It is a capacity to bounce back from stressful events, from major stress events, with less negative effects. So it's an ability to, or the capacity to recover from stress. So everybody gets stressed because of a stressful. After experiencing the stressful events, everybody gets stressed, but some people are really resilient. They can recover from that stressful events. They recover from that stress very quickly. And they are able to recover from stress. And there are not a lot of negative effects after they recover from stress. You know that some people are not resilient. They are able to bounce back from stress events as well, but there are a lot of side effects. There are a lot of negative effects that follow them, even though they have recovered from the stressful events. So that is an individual difference. Some people are resilient and some people are not that resilient. And the resilient people, they can recover from stressful events very quickly, and there are not a lot of the negative effects because of the stress. And the second concept that we need to know of is called hardiness. So hardiness is also a feature of individuals. So what is hardiness? There are three features for the people who are hardy, or the people who have high levels of hardiness. Firstly, they like challenges. The hardy people like challenges. They see the stressful events as challenges. They see the challenges as chances to grow instead of threats. So they are more likely to perceive those events as challenges, and they like them. They like to meet the challenges. And the second feature of hardy people is that they have a very strong sense of commitment. They commit to their goals. They have the goals. They're very committed to their goals. They know what their goals are, and they just pursue their goals no matter what. So it says in the textbook that they have a zest for life. They just have a very, very strong commitment to their goals, no matter what kind of events they have met. They're on their track to pursue the goals. And the third feature of hardiness is the internal locus of control. So we have learned about locus of control in the chapter about personality. So it is a perception, or it's a perception of where the location of control is. So people with the internal locus of control, they believe that they can determine the consequences of events. When they want to put effort, they can influence the outcomes of the events. So that people with the internal locus of control believe that they can influence life events. They can change the outcomes. They can do to change the situation. So that is the consequence of internal locus of control. So the hardy people like challenges. They're more likely to perceive events as challenges instead of threats. And they have a very strong commitment to the goals that they want to achieve. And also they believe that they can influence the outcomes of life events. They can do something to change the situation. So these are the three features of hardy people. So we can see why hardy people can respond to stress very well. They can reduce stress, or they can not have that much stress because of the stressful events. Because of their features, they are more likely to perceive events as challenges, and they have a strong commitment to the goals, and they have an internal locus of control. So that if you want to be a person who can respond to stress very well, you can gradually to develop this kind of features. Yeah, these are two individual differences that make people to be different in terms of responding to stress. Okay, so let's go to the next part. And there are some responses that do not help reduce stress, do not help effectively manage stress. such as the distortions of perceptions, lie to themselves, lie to people themselves, distorts the perceptions of those life events. So indeed, some life events are indeed very threatening and very unhealthy to people, but we need to recognize the truth in the world, so we cannot distort these perceptions. And the second response that does not help is lying to the self. So as I just said, we cannot lie to ourselves because the stressful events are real. And usually response, one of the usually responses is binge drinking. So every time, some people drink a lot because they are really stressed. They have a lot of stress, so that they drink a lot. They try to get rid of the stressful feeling. Not because they like drinking, but because they want to get rid of their real life. And taking drugs is another way to get rid of the real life. So you can see that these responses are the responses that are not useful strategies, not real useful strategies to really manage stress. These responses are just the responses that how people temporarily get rid of that kind of feeling. That kind of feeling is always there. They just want to numb themselves. They are helpless, maybe. They might be helpless. They cannot change themselves. They cannot change the situation to get rid of that kind of feeling. They always have that kind of stress feeling. And so that they lie to themselves, they drink a lot, try to numb themselves, they take drugs, they try to get high, they try to numb themselves as well. So those responses do not really help. But you might ask, what are the useful responses? There are a lot of useful responses. Let's know about them. So to cope with stress, to reduce stress, we have different kinds of coping styles, coping strategies. Some coping styles or strategies are effective. So the first effective coping style is called a problem-focused coping. So what is problem-focused coping? Change the situation, change the event, solve that problem. If that threatening or stressful life event is gone, stress is gone. Because we have a evaluation of that kind of a threatening event, so that we have stress. If that event is gone, stress is gone, right? So there's nothing is there. If we solve the problem, stress is gone. So that is problem-focused coping. So let's face directly the problem. Another coping style is emotion-focused coping. So sometimes the thing is there, such as economic crisis, such as natural disaster. We cannot solve that problem. We cannot make that thing disappear. So we need to deal with our own emotion. So that is emotion-focused coping. We need to change the content in the appraisal process. In other words, we need to reappraise. So that process is called reappraisal. So we need to reappraise that event. We need to perceive that event in another way. So we just talk about at the beginning of the lecture that in the primary appraisal, people may perceive that event, may evaluate that event as threatening or challenging, right? So we don't have to perceive everything as threatening. So if we have perceived that thing as threatening, we can reappraise. We can think about it again. We can reappraise it as challenging instead of threatening. So how do we do that? how do we change that kind of evaluation about that event? So what I recommend here is called a proactive coping. Probably that it is the most effective coping strategy to reduce stress, to do the emotional focused coping. So we can interpret that stressful event as something that can help us grow and develop skills and knowledge. So as I just said, we do not have to evaluate that event as threatening. We can evaluate that event as something that is challenging. That thing can make us grow. We can overcome that challenge, and after we overcome that challenge, we can grow. We can be more experienced. We can be more skillful to deal with difficult situations. We can develop more skills, for example. We can think of it in another way. We can take advantage of negative events. So for sure that there are a lot of negative events. There are a lot of events that are potentially threatening, but we can perceive those events as something that we can overcome, and we can take advantage from those events. For example, like if we travel to another place and we get tired, and the feeling of fatigue, the physical fatigue, can make us very stressed, right? So the undesired feeling in the physical body can make us very stressed. And that is a challenge. That is not a threat. You can perceive it as a threat, but you can perceive as a challenge. We can overcome that challenge. We can get enough sleep at night, and the next day we can get refreshed. We can get stronger, right? So if we train our body to get used to that kind of lifestyle, traveling a lot every day, walking a lot, or riding a bicycle a lot in the wild. So our physically get tired every day, but that is a good thing. Actually a good thing for us, because we can get stronger. We can get more energy from that even. And another example is the training of muscles. How do we get stronger muscles? How do we get bigger muscles? We need to train the muscle, and the muscle gets sore, right? So every time we train the muscles get sore, get really sore. That is a threat. That is actually a threat to somebody's well-being, because that feeling is actually the breaking of the muscle cells. The muscle cells are broken so that we can have that kind of undesired feeling. However, the next day, the muscles get recovered from that situation. And after that, the muscles get stronger. Right? So you need to give some kind of stress to your muscles so that muscles can get stronger. That is the only way. Otherwise, there's no other way to get bigger muscle. If you don't give your stress to your muscles never grow, never get bigger. And in this sense, stress is good. Negative events is good. Threats are good. Of course, the stress cannot be too threatening, too big. Sometimes people train their muscles too harsh, and there's a chronic harm to that muscle. So you need to give some kind of stress to your muscles, and your muscles get broken and recover from that, and then muscles get stronger. So you need to deal with the kind of the level of stress. You can give a certain level of stress to your muscles. So it's a similar with the proactive coping, and you might meet other kind of stressful events, not only training the muscles. But you can perceive that those events as something that you can train yourself. You can overcome that kind of events, and after that, your abilities can grow. So you will never grow if there are no stressful life events. So if there are no stressful life events, you never grow. You grow because you solve a problem. For example, a mathematical problem that is very difficult, and you try hard to solve that problem. Your skill grows because of that. If you are doing something, if you are doing some mathematical questions that are really easy for you, there's no challenge in it, your mathematical skills never grow, right? Because you're always that is always easy for you. You don't have to have higher skills to solve those mathematical questions. So the best way to reduce stress is to have proactive coping as a strategy of emotion-focused coping style. So we can see here that there are two kinds of effective coping styles. First, change the event. Second, change the appraisal. So event and appraisal are two factors that cause stress. You either change this or that. You can change both even. Yeah, you can solve the problem. You can like change your appraisal about that event using proactive coping. Okay, and also there are other strategies. So you do not only rely on yourself, you can seek the social support from others. You can rely on others to help you reduce stress. So how to do that? You can build good relationships with others. And good relationships are the key to happiness. And also that is a key to reduce stress. And people with good relationships with others, they have strong and caring and good relationship with others. They're less stressful. They're less stressed. And also when you meet some kind of stressful events, you can seek advice from others. You can seek the help from others. And others may give you the advice, or others may actually help you to solve that problem. That is a way of problem-focused coping, right? And if friends cannot actually help you to solve that problem, they can give you encouragement. They can give you guidance. They can give you the emotional comfort, right? So they can help you to do the emotion-focused coping. You can share the experiences with other people, and other people can respond to your emotions. The stress will be managed because through this process, you know about yourself. You may reappraise. You may appraise this event as something that is challenging, or you may appraise this event as less threatening. You might think that, oh, that event is not that threatening because you are okay after sharing the experiences with others, after others responding to your emotions with kindness. Because people have ability to be empathic. So we talk about empathy in the chapter about social psychology. So we can understand other people's perspectives. We can understand other people's emotions, even though we do not have those direct experiences. if you share your experiences with others, others will show empathy to you. And at that moment, you know that other people understand you, understand your perspectives, understand your emotions, understand your struggles. And when other people can understand you, magic happens. And you have the more power to manage that stress. Because you get known. You get known by other people. You get understood by other people. That is very interesting. That is the power of empathy. Empathy can make people manage stress. And also there are a lot of other positive benefits of empathy as well. But one of positive benefit of empathy is that empathy can help us reduce stress. So that is so these are the good ways to seek social support. So you can rely on yourself to cope with the stress using emotion-focused coping and problem-focused coping. And also you can seek the social support from others. So others might help you to cope with the stress. So you are not alone there to cope with stress. Other people might help you. And that is about stress. And we have talked about what stress is, talk about the cause of stress, and talk about the stressors of stress. And we have talked about consequences of stress, and we have talked about how to respond to stress, how to manage stress. And another big topic for today is about happiness. So it's like another side, it's like opposite of stress. And also we talk a little bit about positive psychology. So what is happiness? Everyone might have his or her own answer to this question. What is happiness? So we at least have some kind of understanding of what happiness is. So the intuitive notion of happiness, that means that if I ask you what is happiness, what idea comes to your mind, occurs to your mind first? That is intuition about what happiness is. Happiness is being happy, right? So have a lot of a happy emotion. That is happiness. So having more positive emotions is probably the understanding of happiness for a lot of people. And in psychology, there is a professor whose name is At Dinner. At Dinner conducted a lot of research on what happiness is. So happiness is really a topic that is really studied in psychology, actually. So At Dinner proposed that there are 3 components in the concept of happiness. So the first component is having more positive emotions. So positive emotions can be happiness, can be calmness, can be pleasure, can be interest, can be excitement, and so forth. So these are the positive emotions. And the second component of happiness is that there are less negative emotions. So negative emotions include sadness, include anger, include fear, include disgust. You can see there are a lot of basic emotions that are negative, actually. So in nature, we have more types of negative emotions rather than positive emotion. So remember that there are 7 kinds of emotions that are really universal for everybody. So fear, anger, sadness, disgust, contempt. So these 5 emotions are absolutely negative emotions. And there's only one positive emotion, that is happiness. So when we have positive emotions, mostly we are talking about happiness. So when we have talking about negative emotions, we may have a lot of different kinds of negative emotions, such as anger, fear, and sadness. So one second component of happiness is less negative emotions. And the third component of it is more about cognitive component of it. It is more thinking process. It's a satisfaction with life. So sometimes we think that we are satisfied with our life. That is one part of happiness. So happiness not only includes emotional part, such as having more positive emotions and having less negative emotions, but we also believe and think that we are satisfied with life. So these are the three components of happiness based on Addiner's research. And another way to understand happiness is by Seligman. So Professor Martin Seligman proposed this model of happiness or well-being. So it's called a PERMA model. So there are 5 components in happiness. You can see there is positive emotion for sure. When we are happy, we have a lot of positive emotion. And second component is engagement. So when we have high level of happiness or well-being, we are oftentimes engaged in what we are doing. So engagement is a very important part of happiness. So we are really engaged in life. We are really focused on what we are doing at certain moments. We have happiness. And also third component of happiness is relationship. If we have good relationships, we are happy. Not only the way to reduce stress, but also the way to get happiness. So relationships are really important for us. And also the next component is meaning. It means that if we know the meaning in life, we can find the meaning in life, or we can make sense of life. We can make the meaning for our life. We can be happy because we know what our life is for. We know our purpose in life is. We are not confused. We have a clear purpose in life. We know that our life is meaningful. So actually, our human is a species that seeks meaning. Other animals do not seek meaning. They cannot understand this, but people always seek meaning in life. If they do not have meaning in life, or they cannot find the meaning in life, they suffer. They are painful. The pain of having no meaning. So oftentimes people are painful not because they suffer from those concrete events, but because they feel that they don't have meaning in life. Their life is meaningless. That is a very horrible situation for their life. So everybody hopes that his or her life is very meaningful. And the next component is accomplishment. That is actual achievements that people can gain. So that is the evidence that shows that their life is effective. Their life is successful. So that is also a component. So you can get the first letter of every word out of the 5 components. You can get PERMA. So it's called PERMA. So this kind of a model of happiness is called the PERMA model. It's a mnemonic device that you can have to remember the 5 components of happiness: positive emotion, engagement, interpersonal relationship, meaning, and accomplishment. Okay, so that's like a more on like higher level of like understanding of happiness. Not only having emotions or satisfaction, but have a lot of other components. So the next question I try to discuss here is, does money buy happiness? The answer is yes and no. So the answer is complex, and it's not only simple yes or no. It's both yes and no. If the income of a certain person is too low to afford enough food or shelter, yes, the answer is yes. More money means more happiness. If the income is enough to afford food and shelter, the answer is no. Money is not related to happiness anymore. If the income is high enough to get enough food and shelter. So that is not my notion. That is an actual scientific study. There's data that back up this conclusion. So they found that when the income level is high enough, people's happiness level is not related to their income level anymore. But if people's income level are really low, more money means more happiness. So the money is positively related. The income level is positively related to the level of happiness. For the people who have very low income. So it means that if their physiological needs are not satisfied, for example, they cannot get enough food, they cannot get the proper place to stay. For example, they don't have home, or their homes are too simple or too unsafe. More money means that they can buy more food, and improve their shelter or improve their home. So that means that they can get their physiological need satisfied more likely. So that's why income is related to happiness. When people are really hungry, they're happy when they get food, right? So when they already get enough food every day, they don't lack food, they are not happy anymore when they get more food. That is very intuitive. You can have that experience. When you are hungry and you get food, you're happy after eating a lot of food. But when you get full, when you get satiated, and I give you more food, you will not be more happy. You will not be happier because you get enough food. You don't need more food anymore at that moment. So the logic is the same here. If the income is too low to afford enough food and shelter, people are more happy when they get more money. However, if their income level is high enough, they already get enough food and shelter, they will not be happier if they get more money. So that explains why a lot of rich people are not happy, still not happy. They have a lot of money, but some of them are not still happy. So why is that? Because the hierarchy of needs theory. Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory tells us that when the physiological needs are satisfied, so the physiological need is on the bottom hierarchy in this pyramid of needs. So when the physiological needs are satisfied, people do not seek that kind of need anymore. They tend to focusing on other needs. They tend to focusing on satisfying other needs, such as love, belongingness, such as the esteem needs, such as gaining the achievement. So they want to have more love from others. They want to have more relationships. They want to have more achievements. They want to, be successful in the society. So that's what they want. So when people get enough money, enough physiological needs, they get enough food, shelter, and those physiological needs are satisfied, they need to pursue other needs, such as good relationships, such as the meaning in life, such as the success in the society, such as the career success, career achievement, all those kind of things. So money does not buy everything. Money does not buy happiness all the time. It's not depends on money. It depends on the hierarchy of the needs. It depends on at that moment, at that situation, what the person really wants to do. Depends on that. Happiness depends on what they really want to do or what they really need in that situation. Okay, so let's go to another topic. So there is a branch in psychology that studies happiness, studies this kind of topic. So does money buy happiness? That is only one question to answer in this branch of psychology. This branch of psychology is called positive psychology. So that is a very new branch. It's like mentioned in 1998, two professors, Martin Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi. These two professors proposed that the psychology should focus on helping people build human strength, help people grow, and help people flourish, rather than solving the problems and focus on the adversities of human nature. So this is the guiding rule of positive psychology. So they mean that in psychology, we should be focusing on studying like how people are getting better, how to build the strength of people, how to help people grow, how to people get more happiness, how to people get more benefits and good things, instead of solving their psychological problems and focusing on studying how people are bad, how people are wrong, something like that. So this is a positive psychology, and after that, the positive psychology movement started to be very popular during the past 20 years. And there are three main categories of positive psychology. There are three main categories of topics to study in positive psychology. The first category is called positive experiences. It means that what kind of experiences that people have that are positive, help them to grow, help them to be better. So these experiences may include happiness, well-being, positive emotions, and love, or optimism, or gratitude. So these are the experiences that people have that are really positive. And another category of topics to study in positive psychology is positive traits. So those are the individual characteristics, stable characteristics that are positive, that help people grow and flourish. So positive traits might include courage, interpersonal skills, wisdom, forgiveness, and other character strength, such as humility or so humility is also one of them. There are a lot of character strength that are traits that are stable that exists in a lot of people's personalities. So these traits are really positive and help people to live better, to have a better life. And the third category is about the place that people stay in. So those are the positive institutions, such as a positive school and a positive workplace. So these are the three categories of topics in positive psychology. So when other people ask you what is positive psychology, you can talk about, oh, there are three kinds of things to study. One is the positive experiences. Another one is the positive traits that are stable characteristics. And the third one is positive places or positive institutions. So this is a positive psychology. And this is the end of today's lecture. And we have an extra credit assignment for this week. So this assignment is really related to today's lecture. So to do this assignment, you need to find a life event that is very stressful, makes you very stressful. So you need to find a stressor in your life, a real stressor in your life that makes you very stressful. And the second step, reappraise it. Do the reappraisal. You might reappraise that event as threatening, but right now, please interpret that event as something that provides you an opportunity to grow. In other words, you can interpret that event as something that is challenging. So does not reappraise that event as something that is threats your own well-being. So just change the interpretation of that life event. Find the reason for why that thing might be challenging. Find the reason for why that thing might provide you a chance to grow instead of something that harms your well-being. After the process of reappraising, and you need to observe yourself to see whether you have less stress or not. And after that, write a short essay. And that essay is up to 1 page, double space or single space, up to you, but write a really short essay, 1 page essay, to describe 4 things. First, what the life event is. You tell me what life event is. Second, how you interpret it before. How you think that is a stressful life event before. And third, how you reappraise that event. So describe the process of interpreting that event as a chance instead of a threat. And last, you need to describe what the effect of the reappraisal is. You can write about whether you have less stress or not. You can write, oh, I have less stress. And you can write, oh, I still have a lot of stress. So first, the events. Second, the earlier previous interpretation. And third, the new interpretation of that event. And last, the effect of the reappraisal. So this actual credit assignment is 1 point. You can find it in this week's module. There's an actual credit assignment is about this. And here are the concepts that you need to know for this week. So just know the concepts: stress, stressor. So at least you know what this means, what this means. And also you need to know the concept of appraisal. Actually, we have learned about appraisal in the chapter about emotion. But in this week, also know about what appraisal is. And also you need to know about fight or flight response. And also you need to know what burnout is. Burnout is one of the psychological consequences of stress. And you need to know the two coping styles to cope with stress. One is problem-focused coping, and the other is emotion-focused coping. And also you need to know proactive coping. And the next one is the 5 elements in the PERMA model, PERMA, positive emotion, engagement, relationship, meaning, and accomplishment. And also know the 3 categories of topics to study in positive psychology: positive experiences, positive traits, and positive institutions. And happy Thanksgiving, and thank you. So last, let me show you where the actual credit assignment is. So it's here. You can open Canvas and find the actual credit. Write about how you reappraise in assignments. So that's the name of this actual credit assignment. Here are the requirements for this assignment. So it's exactly the same with the last slide. So you can choose to submit this assignment. Yeah, so happy Thanksgiving, and see you next week. And the next week is the last lecture, last chapter. Actually, next week covers 2 chapters, chapter 15 and 16, about psychological disorders and the treatment of the psychological disorders. So that is the last time that for this class to have formal lectures. And yeah, see you next week.